RPGs, or role-playing games, have always been one of the biggest genres of video games out there. Not only can you typically make your own character in these sorts of games, but you pretty much get to pick how your character's life turns out, what groups you join, what alliances you make along the way, and so much more. Xbox Game Pass boasts over 100 games, and new ones get added each month. With day one releases and more, Xbox Game Pass has a pretty good catalog of games, including a lot of RPGs. However, there are certainly some that are better than the rest, so let's talk about 10 of the best RPGs over on Xbox Game Pass. At number 10 on our list is Starfield. Bethesda's latest RPG adventure takes you right into space where your player character travels across the galaxy in search of artifacts and an answer to the strange visions you keep having in respect to these artifacts. Starfield plays like most of the other Bethesda RPG games, but with a heavier emphasis on shooter combat and a heavier sci-fi influence. Although Starfield wasn't my personal all-time favorite Bethesda game, I still feel like it earns a spot on this list because it is a pretty robust and deep RPG. In my playthrough of Starfield, I went for the pirate life and went around the galaxy stealing ships. It's pretty fun for these sorts of things, though it is a bit limited within its morality system, in my opinion. Still, if you're looking for a fun RPG to sink a good number of hours into, you might want to consider Starfield. Developed by Obsidian Entertainment, which also worked on Fallout New Vegas, The Outer Worlds is an action RPG that takes place in an alternate future where President William McKinley was never assassinated. Without Theodore Roosevelt to succeed him, corporations are never broken up, and the future is dominated now by these mega corporations. The companies begin to colonize space, and many people on Earth decide to travel to these new planets in hopes of a new life. You play from a first-person perspective and can create your own ship, which basically acts as the central hub of the game. This ship serves as the fast travel point as well. Throughout the game, you will recruit NPCs who will aid you in combat, and you can bring along companions to explore with you the different worlds that you visit. Combat involves melee and guns, and there are skill points you can use to level up and unlock new skills for both you and your crew. The Outer Worlds has been likened to Starfield as well, so if you find yourself enjoying Starfield, or maybe want something a bit different, then you should definitely check out The Outer Worlds, plus there's also a sequel that you can play if you do end up enjoying the first game. Dragon Age Inquisition is an action RPG that follows your player character, the Inquisitor, as you go throughout the continent of Thedas to close a mysterious tear in the sky called the Breach, which is unleashing demons onto the world. The gameplay of Dragon Age Inquisition is centered around third-person combat, with a traditional RPG top-down camera as well, and lets you control your character and several companions in combat. Dragon Age Inquisition has a semi-open world, and the world itself is broken up into sections that you can freely explore. Beyond the main story, there are side quests and activities where you can seal fade rifts, capture forts, and establish camps. Throughout the game's story, you can interact with NPCs and recruit them for the Inquisition. You have dialogue choices, and depending on what race and class you selected at the character creator, you may get special dialogue choices. Dragon Age Inquisition is a fantasy game, so if you're a fan of games with dragons, magic, and other pretty well-known fantasy elements, then this is probably the perfect RPG for you. With 3 combat classes, those being warrior, mage, and rogue, and the ability to fully customize your character, there's really a lot of nice features in Dragon Age Inquisition that make this game worth sinking time into. At number 7 is Lies of P, an action RPG that is also a Souls-like. And if you don't know what that means, a Souls-like is basically a game that emulates From Software's Dark Soul design in some way, shape, or form. Typically, this means through difficult boss fights, an unforgiving and challenging dark world, and the need for approaching fights with strategy. There's more to being a Souls-like than that, but that's kinda the gist of it. Lies of P takes place in a Victorian Gothic-inspired world called Krot. You play as Pinocchio, a humanoid puppet in a world overtaken by killer puppets, zombies, and more, with the goal of uncovering what happened and why. Combat in Lies of P involves crafting swords, a legion arm that lets you add things like a grappling hook or electrical shocks, and fable arts, which is a sort of magic system that gives you a boost with your attacks. It's also important to time attacks when fighting, as well as parrying, which is one of the biggest elements to the combat style of Lies of P. If you've enjoyed games like Sekiro or Bloodborne, then Lies of P is perfect for you. It's a personal favorite of mine, and I consider it to be one of the best Souls-likes out there that really gets the From Software style down. Another Souls-like in a way, Remnant II is the sequel to Remnant from the Ashes, but it's an absolutely fantastic game. Called the Souls-like with guns, Remnant II features multiple worlds that are procedurally generated, so no two playthroughs are alike. Combat in this game revolves mainly around guns, but there is a melee component as well. Remnant II takes place in a world overrun by the Root, and you must travel through throughout the multiverse to stop it. The game mainly revolves around sections of the world that you clear and then boss fights. A lot of the combat works on the dodge and roll system that we often see in Souls-likes, but there is the ability to change the difficulty in case that you find it a bit too hard for you at some of the higher levels. Still, Remnant II is a game that I 100% recommend because it's just that fun. You can pick your own class, with each class getting its own combat style instead of weapons that are tailored to your preferred playstyle. You can get upgrades on your weapons, there is a sort of magic-like system as well, and the game can be pretty brutal with the types of enemies it throws at you, but it's a good challenge to go through. I would say Remnant 2 is a bit better than the first game, so if you're gonna choose to play any of them, go ahead and play the second one. You might be a bit lost in terms of the story, but you'll still be able to enjoy the combat and the gameplay. I know this game does get some flack for some of its more microtransaction-y stuff, but Diablo 4 is still an RPG that is really worth giving a go. It's also a bit of a different one than the others on the list, as it is a dungeon crawler, but it's still a fantastic RPG nonetheless. Diablo 4 lets you play as your own customizable character and lets you pick your class as well, so you can play as something like a necromancer or a barbarian. In total though, there's 5 classes. The story takes place 50 years after the third Diablo game, when cultists have summoned Lilith, the daughter of Mephisto. You play as the Wanderer and start your journey off after being drugged by villagers who basically want to sacrifice you. You manage to escape, and pretty much your goal is to basically defeat Lilith, but there is a ton of other things to this game, so it's not just that. With procedurally generated replayable dungeons, you travel throughout Diablo 4, obtaining stronger weapons and equipment, beating tougher enemies, and working towards making your character super powerful. Diablo 4 is one of the fastest selling Blizzard games ever and was actually well received critically. At this point, if you want to get into Diablo 4, you definitely should. Assassin's Creed Odyssey is one of my favorite RPGs ever, and it's surprisingly a really good Assassin's Creed game, even if it isn't super faithful to the original Assassin's Creed style. However, if you're someone that prefers having open worlds with a ton of stuff to do, then Odyssey is definitely your game. Set in ancient Greece, you get to pick to play as either Alexios or Cassandra, a mercenary and descendant of King Leonidas. There is a main story that you can complete, but there are a ton of branching quest lines, a lot of NPCs to interact with, a massive open world, and a lot of beautiful architecture to see and observe. The game takes place in the Peloponnesian War, so you can even side with Athens or Sparta and weaken the other region. If you're expecting this to be like the older Assassin's Creed games with tons of stealth, it's not really the game for that. There is some chance to play in a stealthy format, but at the end of the day, Assassin's Creed Odyssey is still more combat exploration focused. There's a ton of weapons to use, including spears, bows and arrows, swords, daggers, and more. You can totally customize your look and pick out different gear, upgrade your stuff, and make your character really how you want to see them. Now, you can't customize the actual character's look, but you can pick all your gear to make your build the way you want it to be, so there is some customization on that front. AC Odyssey, in my opinion, is a ton of fun, so if you're looking for an RPG that you can sink literally way too many hours into, then Odyssey is the game for you. Fallout New Vegas is personally one of my favorite Fallout games of all time. It's a pretty old game and you can definitely see that when you're playing, but don't let that detract you from this amazing title. Fallout New Vegas takes place in the Mojave Desert over 200 years after a nuclear war has basically destroyed most of the United States. Your role in the game is a courier who survived an assassination attempt. Your goal is to find who tried to assassinate you, but you're caught in the middle of a war between different factions in the game, such as the New California Republic or Caesar's Legion, and you can choose which faction you ally yourself with as well. Gameplay in Fallout New Vegas revolves around different types of weapons like guns and energy-based stuff. There is some melee, but guns are significantly more effective in combat in this game. Fallout New Vegas has been considered one of the best Fallout games of all time, and in general one of the best RPGs of all time. There's a lot to do in Fallout New Vegas, and there are multiple endings depending on the choices you make throughout the game. If you had to pick any Fallout game to play first, I would say play New Vegas first any day. Although it's an older title on this list, it's still one of the best ones you can play. Of all the RPGs on this list, I've always found Mass Effect 2 to be a different experience on its own. One of my favorite games I've ever played, Mass Effect 2 from the Legendary Edition, is an amazing sci-fi video game that really showcases the best BioWare has to offer. You play as Commander Shepard, who you can customize totally to your liking. Mass Effect 2 can also connect to Mass Effect 1 and port your character and decisions over, or you can start an entirely new game with a new character on its own. Combat in Mass Effect 2 mainly relies on guns with a companion system, power-ups, and more, depending on your selected class. Mass Effect 2 also has an in-depth dialogue system with choices you make changing the way Shepard is perceived and the way characters interact with you. The game's ending can be different each time you play it depending on the decisions you make and which companions you keep around you. Mass Effect 2, I would say, is like a book that you're playing. It's written in a space opera style, and it has a lot of ins and outs to it, with tons of lore, great characters, and in my opinion, some great world building too. It's not boring by any means, as the game is still very heavily combat based, but the story that overlays the whole game is absolutely fantastic. If you want a more story-heavy RPG with drama, in-depth characters, and a fun combat system, then you should definitely check out Mass Effect 2. This is one of my personal favorite RPGs, and I've replayed it a few times by now because of how much I liked it. Probably one of the most exciting fantasy RPGs out there, Skyrim is a very well-known and very beloved game that really does have a lot going for it. Set 200 years after the Elder Scrolls Oblivion, Skyrim follows your player character, the Dragonborn, on a quest to defeat Alduin the World Eater, a dragon who is set to destroy the world. As you play throughout Tamriel, you have access to a very open world, many branching quests, and the ability to do basically whatever it is that you want without even thinking about the main storyline. Skyrim involves combat from either a first or third person perspective, depending on your preference, different kinds of weapons and armors, a magic system, the dragon shout system, and more. I think the biggest selling point with Skyrim isn't necessarily the base game, by the way, but more so the fact that you can mod this game as much as you want. You can mod this game so much, it basically becomes a completely different game. I've seen mod guides on YouTube, for example, of people who turn this game into legitimately a completely different experience. So my point is, this game really has a lot of possibilities just from the modding angle alone. Beyond that, Skyrim is definitely the ultimate RPG experience that you can get because of just the sheer amount of things to do in this game. Almost every NPC can be interacted with in some way, there's a lot to explore, tons of enemies to face off against, and more. Now look, Skyrim will feel dated by today's standards, but if you're willing to look past that, you're definitely in for one of the best RPG experiences out there. And with that being said, thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed that video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe with notifications set to all so you never miss out on a single upload. Comment below which of these is your favorite or which you're planning to play next. Don't forget to check out our website for gaming news, entertainment, and more. The link to that, as well as all our other important links, are in the description below. Thanks again, and I'll see you all in the next one.